The wind pushed dry leaves across the empty playground, the swings creaking behind Officer Mark Reynolds as he stepped out of his cruiser. His boots crunched the gravel path as he scanned the park. That's when he saw them, just past the slide, near the benches. A small boy in a blue hoodie, his cheeks stained with tears, holding a leash attached to a golden retriever mix. The boy's eyes were red, his lower lip trembling. But it was the way he clutched the leash that told Mark something wasn't right. Mark knelt down slowly, his voice calm. "Hey there, buddy. Everything okay?" The boy didn't speak right away. He looked at the dog, then back at the officer, his face contorting as more tears welled up. Mark waited. The dog, sitting obediently by the boy's side, looked up at both of them, its eyes soft, as if it understood the weight of the moment. Then came the words, quiet, cracked, but unforgettable. "Please, sir, arrest my dad, but save my dog." Mark felt those words punch through his chest like cold air. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Eli," the boy said, "and this is Max." The dog's ears twitched at the sound of its name, but it stayed perfectly still. Mark noticed the dirt smudged on Eli's sleeves, the way his sneakers were untied and damp. The boy had been running, and he had run straight to this place, somewhere familiar, somewhere that used to be safe. "What happened, Eli?" Mark asked, watching the boy's small fingers tighten on the leash. "My dad. He hit Max again. I tried to stop him, but he was drinking and yelling. Max didn't even bark. He just cried." The boy's voice trembled. "So I ran. I had to. I couldn't leave Max there." Mark took a breath, steadying his own hands. He'd seen a lot in his years of service, but rarely had he seen a child speak with that kind of courage. As he reached for his radio, Eli looked up at him again. "They're not going to take Max away, are they?" "No," Mark said firmly. "Not if I can help it." But as he looked at the boy, the dog, and the bruised silence between them, he knew. This wasn't just a rescue. This was the beginning of something much bigger. The car ride was quiet. Eli sat in the back seat of the patrol car, one hand resting on Max's back. The dog had curled up beside him on the seat, eyes half closed but alert. Officer Mark Reynolds kept glancing at the rearview mirror. Every time he saw the boy's face, it brought back memories he hadn't touched in years. Of being a scared kid, of hiding bruises and making excuses no one asked for. Now here he was, driving a stranger's son through the same kind of silence he used to live in. They weren't headed to the station. Mark had made a choice. It wasn't by the book, but something told him that Eli didn't need more walls, more questions. He needed time, safety, a soft place to land. So Mark drove to an old farmhouse just outside town, his aunt's property. It had been empty since she passed, but he kept it maintained, almost like a place to breathe when the city felt too heavy. As they pulled up the gravel driveway, Eli finally spoke. "Are we in trouble?" Mark parked the car and turned to face him. "No, you did the right thing, Eli. You protected Max. That took guts." The boy looked down at his lap, blinking fast. Mark opened the back door and helped Eli out, Max hopping down right after him, tail low but wagging gently. Inside the house, everything smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. Mark led them to the kitchen and handed Eli a glass of water. The boy sat at the table, shoulders hunched, while Max lay at his feet. "Do you think my dad's awake now?" Eli asked, barely above a whisper. Mark didn't answer right away. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to scare him. "We'll check on that later," Mark said carefully. "Right now, you both need rest. Max needs to see a vet, and you..." He hesitated. "You need to feel safe again." Eli nodded slowly, reaching down to scratch behind Max's ear. The dog leaned into his touch with a soft sigh, like he understood every word. As the sun began to dip behind the trees outside, Mark stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching them. A boy who had chosen to run, not for himself, but for a creature he loved. It wasn't just bravery. It was something deeper. It was survival. And Mark knew that whatever came next, this was only the beginning of Eli's truth. The farmhouse creaked as the night settled in. It was the kind of silence that felt too big, where every sound echoed louder than it should. Eli sat on the edge of the couch, knees pulled up, arms wrapped around them. Max was curled beside him, his golden fur rising and falling with each breath. The boy hadn't said much since dinner. Mark had tried small talk, even offered him hot cocoa, but Eli's walls were back up. It wasn't defiance, it was defense. Mark stepped out onto the porch to make a call. The vet's office was closed, but he knew someone who always picked up. "Lena, it's Mark. I've got a situation. An injured dog, possible abuse, and a kid too. I trust you." There was a pause on the line, then a calm but firm voice responded, "Bring them by first thing. I'll be ready." Back inside, Mark sat on the recliner across from Eli. "We're going to see someone tomorrow. Her name's Lena. She helps animals. She's kind." Eli didn't respond. His fingers were gently tracing one of Max's old scars. "Will she hurt him?" the boy finally asked. Mark shook his head. "No, she'll help him feel better. That's a promise." The clock ticked past 9 when Eli whispered, "He didn't used to be like that." Mark leaned forward slightly. "Your dad?" Eli nodded. "Before Mom left, he was fun. He made pancakes on Saturdays. He let Max sleep on the couch." The boy's voice cracked. Then one day, she was just gone, and everything got loud after that. Mark didn't speak. He just listened, knowing that sometimes silence was the safest place to put pain. Eventually, Mark brought out an old sleeping bag and set it up beside the couch. "You and Max can sleep here tonight," he said softly. "I'll be right down the hall." Eli looked at the blanket, then up at Mark. "Why are you helping us?" The officer hesitated, choosing his words. "Because when I was your age, no one did." It was the closest Mark had come to saying it out loud in years, and somehow Eli understood. As the lights dimmed and Max nestled closer to the boy's chest, Mark stood in the hallway, watching the scene quietly. The farmhouse, once empty, now held something fragile but real. Not quite healing, but the first breath of it. And as Mark turned off the porch light, he realized, tomorrow might bring answers or more ghosts. Morning came with a thin fog clinging to the fields around the farmhouse. Mark made eggs and toast, but Eli barely touched his plate. Max, however, wagged his tail at the scent of food, nudging Eli's leg gently as if reminding him to stay present. The boy offered a faint smile, the first in nearly 24 hours. "He always knows when I'm sad," he said, rubbing Max's head softly. Mark saw the warmth return, just for a second. They drove in silence to Lena Mayfield's small veterinary clinic just outside town. The building was modest, surrounded by oak trees and the smell of hay. Lena was waiting at the door, wearing a worn denim jacket and a calm expression. She knelt as soon as she saw Max. "Well, aren't you a beautiful boy?" she said gently, letting Max sniff her hand before giving him a soft scratch behind the ear. Inside, the exam room was quiet and clean. Eli stood close to the table, refusing to let go of Max's leash. Lena looked up at Mark as she examined the dog's ribs and legs. Her face shifted subtly. "These injuries, they're not new," she murmured. "Some of these scars are from months ago." Mark nodded grimly. "That's what I was afraid of." Eli looked down, guilt settling in his eyes. "I didn't know how to stop it. I just kept hiding him when Dad got loud." Lena paused, her hand still on Max's back. "You did more than most adults would have had the courage to do, Eli," she said. "You got him out." The boy swallowed hard, blinking away tears. "Can he stay with you?" Lena exchanged a glance with Mark. "For a little while, yes, but it's temporary. We'll have to find something more permanent soon." Eli's grip tightened on the leash again. "But he's my best friend." Mark knelt beside him. "I know, buddy, and we're going to do everything we can to keep you together. But we need to go step by step." For the first time, Eli didn't argue. He nodded slowly, one hand still resting on Max's shoulder. Lena gently led the dog into a side room, promising him a soft bed and a warm meal. As the door closed behind Max, Eli stood still, his small frame trembling slightly. "It feels like I left part of me in there," he whispered. And Mark knew, deep in his gut, that this wasn't just about rescuing a dog. It was about rescuing a boy from the pieces of a life that had already taken too much. Mark had been to hundreds of homes like this one, quiet from the outside, chaotic within. The Murren residence sat at the edge of a crumbling cul-de-sac, paint peeling from the siding, windows cloudy with grime. But what stood out most was the silence. A silence that didn't feel peaceful, felt abandoned. He parked down the street and walked up alone, every step heavier than the last. He knocked twice, no answer, then again louder. Finally, the door creaked open, and there stood Gregory Murren, mid-40s, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, wearing a stained undershirt and a hollow expression. "You the dog cop?" he muttered, leaning against the doorframe. The smell of stale beer and cigarettes spilled out behind him. Mark didn't blink. "I'm here about your son." Gregory laughed, a bitter, dry sound. "That little snitch ran off again?" he scoffed, shaking his head. "You find him hiding in a shed or something?" Mark's jaw tightened. "He came to me, with the dog. Said you heard it. Said you've been drinking and yelling." The man's face twitched. "He exaggerates. That dog's a mutt anyway. Not worth half what it eats." That was enough. Mark stepped forward, firm but calm. "You need to know that Eli is safe now, and the dog is under medical care. If there's any evidence of abuse toward either of them, there will be charges." Gregory's grin vanished. "That boy's a problem," he muttered. "His mother ruined everything, and now I'm stuck picking up the pieces." He pointed a shaky finger at Mark. "You think you're saving him? He'll just end up hating you too." Mark didn't answer, not because he didn't have words, but because nothing he could say would matter to a man who refused to see what he had broken. Instead, he took one last look inside. The empty couch, the shattered picture frame on the floor, the silence that screamed louder than any shout. Back at the farmhouse that night, Eli sat on the porch steps, waiting. His hands were in his lap, empty without Max's leash. Mark sat beside him. "I saw your dad today." Eli looked up slowly. "Is he mad?" Mark paused. "I think he's more lost than mad, but he's not going to hurt you again. I promise." Eli didn't answer. He just nodded once, eyes fixed on the horizon. But deep down, Mark could feel it. This wasn't over. Some wounds don't stay buried. They come back when you least expect them. That night, the farmhouse was quiet again, but not peaceful. Eli lay curled in the sleeping bag, the faint ticking of the wall clock the only sound in the room. Max wasn't there to press against his chest, to breathe beside him. The emptiness where the dog usually slept felt louder than the darkness itself. Mark had offered to leave a nightlight on, but Eli said no. He was trying to be brave, trying to be older than his 7 years. Sometime past midnight, Eli stirred in his sleep. The dream began soft. He was back in their old living room, the one with the yellow couch and the smell of cinnamon from his mom's candles. Joanna Murren was there, brushing his hair back as he sat on the carpet. Her voice was calm, her touch warm. "You're my whole world, Eli," she whispered. "Don't ever forget that." But then something changed. The warmth vanished. The lights dimmed in the dream. His mom turned toward the front door and froze. The silhouette of Gregory Murren appeared, shouting something Eli couldn't hear. A glass shattered. Joanna grabbed Eli's hand and ran, but the dream blurred before he saw where. He awoke with a gasp, heart racing, eyes wide with fear. Mark, who had been dozing in the hallway, rushed in. "Eli, you okay?" The boy sat up slowly, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I saw her," he whispered. "My mom. She looked scared." Mark sat beside him. "Do you remember when she left?" Eli shook his head. "No, I just remember she was there. And then she wasn't." Mark placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Dreams can bring up things we've buried, but they can also help us remember." Later that morning, while Eli stayed behind with a warm drink, Mark drove back to town. Something in the boy's story didn't sit right. No divorce papers had ever been filed. No missing persons report either. Joanna Murren had vanished, and no one had questioned it. Not the neighbors, not Gregory, and not the system. Until now. Mark pulled into the town records office with a question that wouldn't leave him. What really happened to Eli's mother? Back at the farmhouse, Eli stood by the window, watching the wind move the trees. He clutched a photograph he had found tucked in one of Mark's old drawers. A woman holding a baby. It wasn't his mom, but it made him wonder. If Mark had lost someone too, maybe he was the only one who'd understand what was coming next. Mark stood in the dim, fluorescent-lit office of public records, flipping through dusty folders and faded documents. The woman behind the counter had shrugged when he asked about Joanna Murren. No police reports, no forwarding address, she said. Last DMV renewal was 7 years ago. After that, nothing. Nothing. As if she had vanished into smoke. But people don't just vanish, not really. Mark knew that better than anyone. He dug deeper, requesting hospital records, emergency calls, anything. That's when he found it, a single 911 call, dated 5 years earlier. The recording had been flagged but never followed up. A female voice, shaky but clear. He said if I left, he'd make sure no one ever found me. Please, I have my son with me. Then static. That was the last trace of Joanna Murren in the system. Meanwhile, back at Lena's clinic, Eli sat on a bench in the back garden, watching Max sniff the grass. The dog's limp had improved, and his tail wagged again. But the boy's heart hadn't caught up yet. Lena came out carrying a bowl of food and sat beside him. He's a fighter, she said. You know that, right? Eli nodded, quiet. So are you, she added. Most kids would have frozen. You ran. Eli looked down at his hands. It didn't feel brave. It just felt like I had no choice. Lena studied him for a moment. When I was your age, I had a dog named Charlie. My mom left too. I used to tell Charlie everything I couldn't say to people. Eli's eyes lit up a little. What happened to him? She smiled sadly. He got old, but he stayed with me through it all. Eli whispered, I hope Max never leaves. Lena didn't promise he wouldn't, but she did place a gentle hand on his shoulder. He's still here, and so am I. That afternoon, Mark returned to the farmhouse with a storm in his eyes. He sat Eli down at the kitchen table. Eli, I think your mom tried to protect you. I think something bad happened, and we're going to find out what. Eli's face went pale. She's not dead, right? Mark didn't answer, not because he believed she was, but because he knew the truth might be worse than loss. In the distance, thunder rolled low across the hills, and as Max barked once, sharp and sudden, Mark realized whatever had been buried was about to come to the surface. The clouds hung low over the neighborhood as Mark pulled up to the Murren house once again. But this time, he wasn't just there as a cop. He was there as someone chasing the truth. He had the audio recording in his pocket, the call Joanna had made, and even though the evidence was thin, his gut screamed that something terrible had happened in that house. He stepped onto the porch and knocked hard. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. Then the sound of movement inside. Slow, reluctant. Gregory opened the door, shirtless, eyes sunken and distant. You again, he muttered. Don't you get tired of playing hero? Mark's tone was colder this time. I have questions. About your wife. About that night 5 years ago. Gregory's smirk vanished. He stepped back but didn't invite him in. She left. That's it. End of story. But Mark wasn't backing down. She called 911. Greg said she was afraid for her life. Said you threatened her. And then she disappeared. You think that's coincidence? Inside, something shifted. Gregory's grip on the doorframe tightened. His jaw flexed. Get off my property, he hissed. Before I make you. But Mark stepped forward. You didn't just hurt a dog, Greg. You crushed a family. And now I'm going to find out what you buried. For a second, Gregory's mask slipped, and what flickered beneath wasn't just anger. It was fear. Real fear. Mark saw it and he knew. The truth was here. Back at the farmhouse, Eli sat with Lena, flipping through a photo album Mark had brought from the old house. He stopped at a picture. His mother, holding him at the age of 2, standing in front of the garden. He stared at the background. "That wasn't our house," he said softly. That's the neighbor's. I remember now. We were hiding." Lena leaned in. "Do you remember why?" Eli blinked, breathing shallow. "Dad came home early. He was yelling. Mom grabbed me. We ran out the back door." Suddenly, Eli stood up. "The crawl space," he said. "Under the kitchen floor. She hid something there. I remember her lifting the rug." Mark returned just minutes later, heart pounding. Eli ran to him. "There's something under the house. Mom put it there." Mark didn't wait. He drove back immediately, this time with backup. The house was already empty. Gregory was gone. But beneath the floorboards, they found a small, rusted metal box. Inside it, a journal, a letter, and a photograph with blood on its corner. The farmhouse was quiet when Mark laid the rusted box on the kitchen table. Eli sat across from him, hands clenched in his lap, eyes fixed on the metal lid. Lena stood behind them, arms crossed tightly over her chest. No one spoke for a long time. Mark finally opened it. Inside were 3 things: a small leather-bound journal, a folded envelope with "For Eli, when he's ready" written in soft cursive, and a photograph. Faded, crumpled, with a reddish stain on the corner. The photo showed Joanna and Eli in a park. But behind them, just barely visible, was Gregory in the distance, watching them. Mark's hand tightened around the photo. "She knew he was following her," he murmured. He opened the journal first. The entries were dated over several months. Scattered thoughts, panic, fear. One passage read, "I don't know how much longer I can stay. Greg doesn't sleep. He walks the halls. He blames Eli for everything. I caught him yelling at Max again. If I leave, I have to do it in secret." Another entry, dated the week she disappeared, read, "I've packed a bag. Tomorrow night, I'll take Eli and Max and go to Aunt Maggie's. I've hidden this journal under the floor in case something happens." Mark swallowed hard. Then he opened the envelope. The letter inside was written with shaky hands but clear love. "My sweet Eli, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't keep my promise to come back. I wanted to protect you from everything, especially your father's darkness. You are not like him. You are kind, gentle, brave. Never forget that. Love is something you give freely, and you gave it to Max without hesitation. That's who you are. That's who you must stay." Lena turned away, her hand over her mouth. Eli didn't cry. He just stared at the letter, then whispered, "She tried to save me." Mark nodded slowly. "And she did. You ran when it counted. That's why you're here." But the most chilling part was still to come. At the back of the journal, a final line scrawled hastily read, "If anything happens to me, look in the basement wall, behind the heater." Mark stood up, already reaching for his keys. "We're not done yet." And this time, when they returned to that house, it wouldn't be to ask questions. It would be to finish what Joanna started. Night had fallen by the time Mark and Lena reached the Murren house. The street was silent, rain beginning to drizzle against the cracked pavement. They entered through the back door, no need to break in. Gregory had left it ajar as if he'd fled in a hurry. The air inside was heavy with mildew and regret. Mark moved cautiously through the kitchen, flashlight in hand, until he reached the old heater in the basement corner. Dust floated in the beam of light like ghosts. He pulled the heater aside, revealing a section of wall that looked different, newer plaster unevenly painted. Mark took a crowbar and pried at the edges. The plaster cracked, crumbled, and fell away. Behind it was a small cavity, and inside, wrapped in a deteriorated blanket, was what he'd feared most. A locket, a woman's ring, and a small silver chain that once belonged to Joanna Murren. Lena covered her mouth, tears streaming silently. Mark exhaled slowly. "He didn't let her leave," he whispered. "He made sure no one ever found her. They called it in." By the time backup arrived, Gregory Murrin was already in custody, arrested 3 towns over, drunk, and muttering that she wouldn't stop talking. The evidence sealed his fate. But for Mark, justice didn't feel clean. Felt heavy, unfinished. Because justice couldn't bring back the years Eli had lost, or the mother he barely remembered. Could only promise that the silence would finally end. At dawn, Eli stood outside the farmhouse, Max by his side, watching the mist lift from the fields. Mark approached, his voice quiet. "They found her, Eli," he said softly. "She's gone. But she loved you more than anything." The boy's eyes shimmered, but he didn't look away. "I already knew," he said, resting a hand on Max's head. "She told me in the dream. She said she was safe now." Mark blinked, caught between disbelief and awe. Sometimes children understood things adults couldn't. A week later, Lena hosted a small memorial in the park where the photograph had been taken. Eli placed a single daisy near the old oak tree, the same spot his mother once sat with him. Max lay beside him quietly, tail brushing the grass. When the wind passed through, it carried the faint scent of cinnamon, Joanna's favorite. Mark stood behind them, hat in hand, the morning sun glinting off his badge. For the first time in years, he felt something like peace. Eli turned to him. "Are we gonna stay here?" Mark smiled faintly. "Only if you want to." Eli looked up at the sky, then down at Max. "Yeah," he said. "I think Mom would like that." And as the sun rose higher, painting gold across the field, Mark realized that this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning born from pain, but rebuilt in love.